Welcome to this presentation on rapid training, the new era in enterprise learning. We're going to go through a couple different areas here related to rapid training. So to get us started, a little bit about myself. My name is Leon Gallegos. I'm serving as the Chief Learning Evangelist for JEB. We are a training services company, a training solutions company. I personally have been in the training and consulting space for about 20 years, primarily focused on the Microsoft product line, Project, SharePoint, Office 365, and others, and recently launched JEB to really address the gap in what we consider to be traditional training as opposed to a more tailored, customized approach to training, and this is where rapid really comes from, again addressing these distinctive gaps that we've identified. And one of those, as we get into this, is around the skills gap. So we know that, particularly here in the U.S., that there are a lot of people that will need these skills, these digital skills, in order to be productive in this kind of modern landscape. And we realize that there is certainly a skills gap there that needs to be addressed. The other part of it that is of course a concern that we address with rapid is just ineffective training. And so responders that we've heard from and have worked with have felt that the training that they are receiving has been largely ineffective, somewhat to largely not what they expected. And so we know that the training can do better, right? We can do a better job of transferring knowledge to students, and that's really where rapid comes into play. Now, when we talk about this notion of rapid training as opposed to traditional training, what are we really talking about? And what you find in a traditional setting, right, traditional training setting, is essentially off-the-shelf agendas. These are agendas or outlines that are provided to an organization that says these are the topics that we're going to go through in this training, in this 2-day, 3-day, 5-day training, whatever it happens to be. So you're pretty much stuck with what you're getting, right? You're getting a set agenda. You also find that a traditional model that it's primarily location-based. So in terms of the training provider that you are working with, they may only have a certain number of locations to actually provide the training. They may be limited in that regard. The other part to it is the content itself, and the content itself in a traditional model is very generalized. Everybody gets the same thing, essentially. So regardless of the course that you're in, when you go through the modules and titles that you're working with, the content that is going to be delivered is going to be the same for every single student, right? So it's cookie cutter content, essentially. The other part to it, of course, is cost. And so in a traditional setting, it's basically how many students do you have, right? And the number of students is going to drive the cost. So we have to be careful with how many people we're actually putting into the course, and we also have to consider things like travel, right, and accommodations for the students if they need to go to that particular location, which may only be delivered in a certain city, right, and a certain time frame. And so we have to have the students, of course, go to that particular location. In the rapid setting, we are focused more on, when it comes to agendas, those agendas that are mapped to requirements, right? And these are the requirements within the organization, largely in terms of goals and objectives, of course, but also what tools are you currently using, right? Is it a combination of some that are in the cloud and others that are at your location, on premise? So it's understanding what your requirements are and mapping those to specific agendas in terms of delivery. Also, in a rapid approach, we have more locations in which to be delivered. And this also includes on-site and purely in the cloud, or specific locations to support your students. When it comes to content, it's role-based. So it's identifying the role and making sure that the content is mapped to that particular role. So students are essentially only getting what they need, right? They're learning what they need as it relates to their role and as it relates to the identified the responsibility, and of course driven by the process within the organization. And then lastly is the cost, right? Cost per project. So we're looking at it as a project, not as just simply how many students you're going to be putting into the course. So this is far more effective, and it's more cost effective as well, because we can touch more students in a shorter amount of time, right? So again, this whole notion of rapid. So let's go through just a couple of these items that we've been talking about as it relates to rapid. And the first thing is, when we talk about rapid, we want to make sure that we understand, what is the goal here. And the goal with rapid training is teaching more people faster, right, and in the most effective way. Effective to the student and also cost effective to the organization, right? So if we can train your users in this way, that means that we can train them more, right? And they can be more effective, more efficient in terms of how they are working within the organization. That's our goal, right? That's the objective with this. So what we're doing is we're taking advantage of what is available to us now in terms of tools, in terms of services, and of course delivery options. And it's really a movement away from this off-the-shelf training model, where we're basically saying, you have these 10 students, we're going to sit them in this particular course. Instead, we're saying, let's see what the students are, what are their roles, what's their responsibility, what's the process, and how can we deliver to them, and how can we measure the performance of those students after we've trained them. All of this is being encompassed under this notion of rapid training, right? So as we go through each of these, the first one is of course the R in rapid, which is role-based, which I've already mentioned a few times. So it's basically taking the users, identifying what role they're in, and making sure that the training is mapped to that specific role, and making sure that we can accommodate that particular user. And you might have a student that is in a remote location, right? They're a team member that works from home, and she needs to attend a particular set of topics. We want to be able to accommodate that user, that learner, in that role, and make sure that they're able to attend those particular topics, right? That's really what's meant by this whole notion of role-based, right? So they don't basically get introduced to functionality of the tool that they're never going to use, right? That's really the whole idea, to be more focused on what they need to be doing with the tool. Then we have augmented, and where augmented basically comes in is, what do you have? What is within your organization that we can introduce as part of the overall training? Each organization is going to use these tools in a very unique way. And by augmenting those tools, we're able to bring in your policies, your guidelines, right, your governance into the training itself, right? And this will add more value, because they will see, that being the students, they will see how this training applies to what they're doing, right, on almost a day-to-day basis, right, as they go through this, because it's augmented. It shows them, here are the business rules, here are the policies, here are the guidelines that the user needs to follow as they work with this new tool. And then we have process-driven. So having a process in place and communicating that during the training allows the user to know how to use the tool, when to use the tool, as it relates to the process. So we identify what that process is, we introduce it to the student, again, as it relates to the software, right? When is it appropriate to upload a document? When is it appropriate to use a workflow? When do we have to append certain metadata to certain documents? All of this will be documented and introduced during the training, right? And articulated, of course, by this process. And then we have innovation, right? Or innovate, as it relates to rapid. And really what this relates to is largely around content and material, but also delivery. We want to make sure that we are innovative in terms of how we introduce the content to the students. What's going to be most effective? And in some cases, cases, it may be a video-based tutorial. If we can record a session and then communicate it out to the larger base of learners, we're gonna take that approach. If it's more appropriate that we use a one-sheet quick start guide, we'll use that, as opposed to having a set way in which we're introducing the content with maybe a printed manual, for example. Well, this is a manual that they may never open. It may be more appropriate that they have a glossy step-by-step guide that sits right next to them as they work, and that seems to help them better. So we need to understand what the culture is within your organization and provide the most innovative way to introduce that content. And then lastly, we have delivered, right? And so with multiple delivery options, whether it's virtual classroom, whether it's all in the cloud, whether it's on-site at your location, face-to-face, maybe it's a combination of those, we want to make sure that we're using the most effective means of, again, delivering the content. This also includes different delivery options. So if we are on-site working with our customers, we want to make sure that we understand, right, again, the culture within the organization, which is going to drive how we're going to deliver, right? This may be mostly labs, or we may work through what we call breakout sessions. These are team-based, scenario based exercises that our students go through, and they love it, right? So we are going to determine, right, what is going to be our best approach, right, to actually delivering. So multiple delivery options, but also different techniques that we're using to make sure that we get the most value out of each engagement that we're working through. So a little bit more on our services or our focus areas around how we can assist our customers, and really it comes down to three critical points that we work through with each of our customers as it relates to rapid and this notion of tailored training. You'll also hear that quite a bit. And the first one is around requirements gathering and analysis. And what this is essentially is allowing us to understand what are your goals and objectives, right? What are you trying to accomplish? What tools you have, what kind of inventory do we have around your solutions, your service areas, and also it's an analysis of what you currently have in place related to curriculum, related to how you are monitoring performance of your students. And really what we're doing is we're trying to surface all of these different aspects within your organization so that we can help you with putting together a training plan that is going to meet those objectives. And during this requirements gathering, we're understanding exactly, again, what you have, what your goals and objectives are, what you currently have in place related to curriculum, performance monitoring, and the like. And what that will drive us to is the second bullet point here, which is content, right? The identification of content and potentially the development of that. Right? So once we have an idea of what our requirements are, we can then put together how we're going to approach the content. And this is, again, bringing in the augmenting of it, identifying processes and how that will map to our content, and then, of course, being able to develop it with you alongside your team working through that. And then lastly is delivery, all right? The multiple delivery options that we have available to us. So this is the execution of the training itself, and then support in terms of not only supporting the learners, but again monitoring that performance, making sure that the training was effective and that we got some value out of it, and how can we change it to become better, right? And so this is an entire support system from beginning to end. Now primarily we're talking about collaboration and productivity tools, right? Not so much on the technical end, because on the technical side of things, there's not so much of a necessity necessarily to have augmented content or process-driven or role-based delivery, right? In technical courses, a boot camp is perhaps appropriate, but not so much when we talk about collaboration, right, and productivity. In this regard, we need to follow a process, and of the many features and functionality that we have available to us, we may only use a small percentage of that, right? And so in this space, in the collaboration and productivity space, is when it's most important that we deliver in this manner. Now, in terms of reaching out to us, feel free to find us obviously online. It's probably how you were able to locate us here. Feel free to send us an email, give us a call directly. We would love to hear from you. Kind of the next steps for us working with our customers is to work through a discovery session, and this allows us to find out where you are, with your training, and how we might be able to help you with the future engagement. So we look forward to hearing from you, and I appreciate you, staying along for this quick presentation on rapid training.